Welcome to USIP ISIP, a weekly podcast with Northern Lights Winery founder Doug Bell, exploring the experiences from leaders in business, social media, and family. Now here's this week's exceptional guest.
Welcome to USIP ISIP. I'm Doug Bell, the host of the podcast. I'm excited to have Dave Horton here with me today. And Dave has a new role as executive director of the Nest Lake Bible Camp. He is also a very popular guy in Prince George because he hosts a ton of events, and he doesn't necessarily do this for money. This guy is actually doing it for free and is really supporting the community. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, you really stepped up, and I can't wait to hear the stories of how some of your projects came to fruition, because I know there was a lot of effort in them, and also the community really appreciates it, so much so that they gave you an award recently. We're going to talk about that really shortly. But Dave, welcome to USIP ISIP. I'm drinking a Cassis Noir blackcurrant wine. Woo. Yes, you have some water, some coffee in that cup, so this is going to be a good project. Since I'm getting early in the morning, I'm getting my wine in. But I want to start with maybe your backstory and where you came from and how maybe your love for helping your community started.
For sure. I don't know. That's what I know. I'm born and raised in Prince George. Went to Van Bien Elementary and then John McGinnis and PGSS. But I remember in elementary school, at the end of the year they hand out those awards, right? And it was like top academic and like top athletic. And let me tell you, neither one of those were on the radar for me. I was not about to win either of those awards, but I kept getting this award for citizenship. But I don't remember ever really being explained what it was. And I remember always being surprised, like every year being surprised by it. And they would say like David Horton for citizenship. And I'd go up and take the certificate, but I had no idea like what it was or what it meant or why even I was getting it. And so I don't know, there's something in like my wiring. There's something just in my head that sees, and it's funny to win those like citizenship awards as a kid and then to receive the provincial medal for good citizenship and still getting the phone call for that. I was like, oh, I guess there wasn't very many candidates this year. You know, like it's like, why did I get this? So there's definitely something in my head. My wife says the same thing. She's like, there's something in you that just sees need and just kind of naturally builds community. But it's not wildly intentional. It's not like I read a book and was like, yeah, like I'm gonna like develop this skill set. It's like, I don't know. It's just there's like stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to do.
Well, I think your wife is right. And I think the terminology building community is really what you do. So many people, when they finish their day at work, they go home, they relax, they play with their kids a little bit, and then they go to bed. You have a family, but then you also seem to derive a lot of enthusiasm for doing all these other projects. Was there a first project maybe that was even back in high school that you started where you didn't necessarily do it for the money, but you did it because you wanted to help somebody and communicate something?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm a Jesus dude, and so like as a Christian, there's a lot of like community in faith, and that's like in a lot of faiths. That community is a huge part, whether you're like a Muslim or a Sikh or whatever that is. Like community is a massive part of that. So I think that's some of like the shaping, a lot of what like shaped my like desire and kind of got a taste for me for building community was just being in really healthy groups and really healthy communities that I felt built up a lot. Like my parents got divorced when I was like 8-ish. And I remember my mom kind of taking us as like three boys and trying to find like a new church, a new community, like a new place. And she found like a church, and then just watching those people kind of, and it really is, when you're 8, you don't really know what's going on, but you see your parents have new friends and your mom has new people and you meet their kids, and then just kind of that thing and how much that kind of like built her up and meant to her. So I think that kind of like just carried through to things for me as well. Like through high school, joined student council. So when I say that I'm not an academic, like I am not an academic. Like, you know, the Super 12s, those guys who come back for an extra semester of grade 12 because just something didn't go quite right. And they're like, I was the super 12. I was like a full grown man with like a beard in high school. And then when you're a super 12, those returning 12s, all your friends are gone. Your graduating class left, and you're there with all these people who are a year younger. And in high school, that's like a bigger deal. And so I remember being there and being like kind of on my own. My social supports and circle were gone. And I remember saying to myself, like, and I think that's kind of one of the things that just repeats in my head is I don't want to just be here. I don't want to just exist. I want to do something with this time. And I don't want to have it just wasted on like the TV or being entertained. It's like, I would rather choose. I think that's part of the wiring is like, I'd rather choose how I'm entertained. And if I'm going to choose it, it's like, let's just do something crazy. So I joined student council, but it's like that. It's the weirdness of this, like academic failure, right? Who has to be there because he couldn't do school well enough. And there's some like mental health stuff in grade 8, grade 9 for me that like I missed quite a bit of school for mental health stuff. Yeah. And so that's why I missed. But to be there as a super 12 doing, helping with student council, and then you got to just run events. So it was like spam carving contests and just kind of watching the school be like, why do this? But high school definitely developed a lot of that thing of like, it's like entertainment is more than entertainment. Entertainment can be connection, and entertainment can be like can change people. It can move them from places of like inward kind of spiraling self-focus to outward thought, and to being more open and honest and transparent with each other, things like that. So
yeah, I think I want to stay here for a second because one thing you kind of mentioned, and you've said it a couple times, is that you're not an academic, right? Why do you think that is? Is it because you are a very intelligent, very articulate person, and perhaps that was just not where your interest lies, right? Because you can tell when you put your efforts and your motivation behind something you're passionate about, like events, you're able to achieve things that very few academics could achieve. Do you feel like there was maybe a missed opportunity within the school system to kind of identify that in you earlier and maybe try and drive more interest for your schooling?
I could not. They couldn't get me to care. Like that's really what it was like I looked behind, like, because you get taught in these things, right? And especially high school, you're given like all these courses. And I just could not see myself applying what they were learning, which is not a great perspective to have, right? Like, because it's almost this arrogance of like, I'm not going to be using this, so why am I going to apply myself? Like, that to me is just like arrogance, right? Like, I'm not going to listen because I know best, right? I know best is not the best place to live in. But I remember I did, the vice principal, the principal sent me and another student when I was a super 12. They sent us to the CBC for an interview. And this other student was a cadet, so like a military cadet. And then I was like clearly headed into this thing of like my faith was leading me to where I was going to find a career, whether I was like a youth pastor or a camp guy, or it was going to be something working with children and youth. It's just kind of where my passion was. So the interview was all based around like what could the school system have done? I remember doing this interview. I had forgotten about this till like this moment, the CBC, and I remember telling them like, I don't know what the school system could have done for me to catch my interest. Because like, were they going to offer something for every faith? Yeah. Right? Like the schools can't, like public schools can't hold religious teaching, but they definitely didn't hold me back from applying my faith. And not like the preaching and the like trying to, or the debate-ish side that can exist in faith of like, I'm going to convince you to believe what I believe, but they couldn't stop me in the side of like service and empathy and compassion and in trying to just engage people. And I was like, so I don't know if there's much more they could have done. They didn't hold me back. That's for sure. Like the administration and the teachers I had, like when I hit leadership courses, strangely, I got great marks, and like drama and these things, but like English and I did okay at history. But like math, oh my gosh. Like I was a super 12, like a grown man, like 19 and in a math 11 course. Mm-hmm. And like just the embarrassment of being there with Mr. LaFleur. And I still see him around town, but the part that engaged me was like Mr. LaFleur was a phenomenal teacher. And he recognized that we were just going to get through that class, but he allowed us to like, I don't know. He had like it was like a social thing in that class. So I don't know. Definitely didn't hold me back.
Yeah, very interesting, and it sounds to me like there were some people within the school system that identified that you weren't necessarily achieving poor results from an academic standpoint due to you as an individual and your abilities to be successful, that you were perhaps not achieving them for other reasons. And so they tried to, did anyone try and feed into those passions that you did have, whether it was leadership or empathy or faith or those types of things? Is there some specific instances where people really kind of drove you forward?
I cannot remember her name, but she was the leadership teacher when I was in grade 12. And she saw something for sure, because she kept handing me the microphone. And I, like, my mental health stuff in grade 8, grade 9, it was like depression, and it was like diagnosed with like obsessive compulsive disorder. And I think I got something going on for sure. Like, as an adult, I work, and it's like I will work with just like blasting music in headphones to focus, or like falling asleep to System of a Down kind of thing. And I'm like, that's got to be a sign of something. Like, just but she, to go from like this hyper introverted, hyper nervous grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, and then in grade 11 and grade 12, she handed me the microphone, and I just she saw something I didn't know was there. Because I remember doing this like public speaking stuff, like rallies. It was like all of PGSS, and standing there, and it was supposed to be me and I think it was Coulter McKay, that piece of dirt. He ditched. So we were supposed to be the two of us emceeing, I think, and he just didn't show. And standing there, and all the lights in the gym kill, and then it's just a spotlight on me in the entire gymnasium at PGSS. And to go from like, I couldn't get myself out the door in grade 8. My poor mom and my poor dad, like they couldn't get me out the door to go to school. It was like anxiety, anxiety wasn't called anxiety then. It was, they were trying to, and it wasn't understood as much. But I think if I was in grade 8 now, it'd be a lot easier. People would be like, you're anxious about going to school. But to go from that, where it was like hyper introverted, like this wounded, quiet, and then 3 years later to be like in front of the whole school with a microphone, and then just winging it. And kind of, she was, that teacher kind of recognized that ability to like wing it. And that's where those like the drama classes, and not necessarily theater, but like the improv and drama classes, I just like thrived in those. And those like just felt like they were just rocket fuel on something that was already there. This thing of like, wing it, do it, make it up, make it happen. I was like, I didn't know I'd wanted to do that. So
we've talked to a few people on this podcast that are presenters or outward facing extroverts that communicate very well with the community. And one thing that we've noticed is that there has always been a component of natural and innate ability for people to be able to do that. And often that showcases at a fairly young age. In your case, maybe it was a little bit later on. But then there's the practice component.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't love it, you're not going to want to do it again and again and again, but you get better as you start to develop these patterns, and you can recognize how an audience will react to specific ways of communicating. You have a very outward way of communicating, which I think is very recognizable, because there's a little bit of maybe self-deprecation, but also it's very humorous. You aren't afraid of looking a little bit ridiculous to communicate a message that you feel is important. And so is that something that started right from the beginning? Or was there any influence, like a Macho Man Randy Savage type person that you idolized, that you wanted to kind of imitate a little bit?
I think it's that like the like improv and like drama stuff. Like, because in grade 8, you don't get to pick your life, and so you're forced into these courses. Like, you're gonna do woodworking. Like, you'll be great. Make a cutting board, and then the next thing is you're sewing, and the next thing is you're typing. Like, they're just trying, and I appreciate that about the public school system, about the school system in general. They cast out all these options, and really they're just trying to push it through. But that drama one, it really was that. I think what it kind of taught me, when you said like that self-deprecation, it was like I didn't have to take myself as seriously as it was. It was like, I'm not a big deal. And that's great. That's actually super freeing for me, is like, I'm not a big deal. This isn't a big deal. And that's kind of led along throughout those things. Because if things are a big deal, if they're hyper serious, then there's like this pressure to, yeah, there's this pressure to meet someone else's standards. But what drama and theater and improv do is, it is that thing. You're ridiculous and you're acting outside of yourself, and you're getting kind of that like reaction, and also realizing it's like, I am liked for who I am, and I'm also liked for how I can make others feel. So I think that's some of what it was for sure. Because even during like Candy Cruise, like I like wearing stupid hats and filming myself in parking lots, like like it's just stupid stuff. But the cost of that stupidity and that like silliness, maybe it's not stupidity, maybe it's more silliness, right? Or what could be like immaturity, was like, it had to be that to have engagement. And it was that thing of like, you need to be this. And then like running program at Nestlake at the camp, and just seeing it was like my ridiculousness and my willingness to not take myself too seriously gave people like great weeks at camp. And like more fabulous experiences, and drew people in that otherwise would not, if the person in front is willing to like laugh at themselves and draw others in, and to like mention other people, like to look for the fringe and to draw them in, kind of thing, with their own bizarreness.
Yeah, there's often you will see how when somebody breaks the tension by being completely ridiculous, there's like a knife that cuts through any tension that might be there at the time, and allows everybody to relax and release a little bit more, and be more accepting of other people as well. So I think that's great. After you graduated your super grad year, you moved on, and you started to get into events, because now you were not in the public system anymore. You didn't have that outlet. Tell us how you developed your portfolio of events that eventually accumulated into a pretty cool award.
So when I was 15, my brother Tyler, see, this is the gold thing of my family. My brother Tyler is the academic. He is completing his PhD at Cambridge, England right now. Right? Like, that's the hilariousness, like the bipolarness of our family is like, you got Tyler and you got Dave. My brother Tyler had worked at Nestlake in 96, and then in 1999, he was like, Dave, you've got to do this, because our youth group at our church, like at College Heights Baptist, is where we had kind of landed as a family, was huge in helping me like heal and work through this anxiety and depression, and really like speaking in and saying like, hey, yeah, you've got stuff going on in your life, but that's not like your identity. Right? Like, the stuff going on in your life isn't who you are. Those are things happening to you. And then kind of finding that. So the youth group was big for that. And like our pastor at College Heights right now is Curtis Reimer, but he was a youth pastor then. And he just let me do like the stupidest stuff. So this like obsessive compulsive thing, like I really love Star Wars. And I remember like watching it as a kid, and I was like, this is simply the greatest thing ever. Like, I don't know what else there could be. Me and my friend Scott, I think we watched it like the whole trilogy like 40 times. Wow. Like, we would just watch, and he could recite them with the sound off. We would watch it with the sound off, and he would recite the whole thing. So Curtis kind of saw the same thing even earlier than that leadership teacher. I wish I could remember her name. She was great. But he would allow me to like run small sections of the youth group. And so he had me do like a Star Wars highlight once every couple of weeks. So I'd have like 40 people in this youth group, and I was in grade like 9, 10, and he had like gave me like the ability to like print overheads for like the overhead projectors. And then I would just teach on the obscure ends of Star Wars, like certain blasters, what they're called and how they're used, and like characters. And it was that kind of stuff, and that youth group stuff kind of tied like the improv life and that together. So then going to camp in 99 was just, like I said, like rocket fuel on a candle. Like, there was a slow burn, and then camp just allows you to figure out who you are, and to separate like the hurt and the damage, or even what people are told that they're going to be. Like, you're going to be this, and they show up. And camp is like, you're independent. You're on your own. Your parents aren't there. You are who you are. You get to pick who you are that week, or for the staff that summer. And so I got to like try out who I was. And that was the end of grade 10 going into grade 11. But event wise, it was mostly within like youth group thing. And then the camp just allowing me to run more and more of the program. So like introduce games. Like we had a program director one year, Dave Fields, and he was like a deeply pastoral, and like pastoral would be like empathetic, compassionate, like wanted to build the heart, but he wasn't like a program guy. He wasn't like, hey, it's great to see you guys. Let's go play a game in the Rose Bowl. He was like, we're really excited that you're all here, and I care about you. And I like, so he was like, why am I doing this? And he just handed me like the game introductions and stuff. And it was that thing, discovering people saw in me what I did not. And that's kind of a common theme from like those elementary school citizenship awards to like the youth group in school, and even through the pandemic running this stuff, people saying like, wow, like you're really doing this. And I'm like, but anybody could do this. And it is. People are like, no, like you're doing this and nobody else is doing this. And then to get recognized provincially, to receive a medal for it, I'm still like, but anybody could have done that. Mm-hmm. And it still is that thing of like, so yeah, in terms of like running events, my own events, like Dave Horton events, really didn't kick off till the pandemic. Yeah. It was always partnered.
Yeah. So what are some of the types of events that you started with, and can you maybe take us through your progression into one of the largest events that the city of Prince George has ever seen in the Candy Cruise? Maybe tell us what that planning and that progression was like.
That's wild. I've always thought of it as like the biggest Halloween party at Prince George may ever see. I've always thought about it that way. I've never really thought about it as like one of the biggest events, but it was kind of big.
It was very big.
It was
very
huge.
Big.
That's interesting. And it was everywhere too. It wasn't like you couldn't escape the thing. Like you mean like pandemic wise, or are you just thinking like life in general wise?
Well, I mean, so you started out by providing like movie nights on the church, and you were developing a little bit of a reputation for bringing people together in a place where they were really looking for outlets, because people were lost. A lot of people lost their communities, their social circles, their faith circles, because a lot of services were shut down at the time. Yeah. And you stepped in to fill this gap. You didn't just do this illegally. Like you worked with health officials to make sure that it was going well. Tell me more about that.
So I was on Vancouver Island with my kids and my wife, and we were watching the whole thing unfold. So we drove down on like March the 15th of 2020. So we knew that the pandemic was going, like things were coming. And we secretly were like, maybe it'll shut down the ferries and we'll just get trapped on Vancouver Island. Because I was like, that wouldn't be the worst thing. But we were watching it all unfold. And just talking to my wife, I was like, so what does this mean for us, right? Because being the news of the pandemic made a lot of people, it was like the fight, flight, or freeze. And I was like, and now in hindsight, I'm like, let's fight it, essentially is what I was saying. It wasn't that intentional, but essentially I was saying with me and my wife, I was like, what? So what? So if they shut everything down, so what? What does that mean for us? Are we just going to lock down? Are we just going to disappear? So I think I went more into fight than freeze or flight. I think it was this thing. I was like, well, what can we do? So in this brainstorm was like drive-in events. I was like, I bet you that like, why couldn't you do drive-in events? So I went on Amazon and bought like an FM transmitter and then had it shipped home. And then when we traveled back for our vacation, we landed at home. And by the time I landed back at home, I had no job. The camp had said like we got, my director, Elliot, made the right call. And he's like, I got to lay off as many people as I can. We've got to go into like mothball mode. So then all of a sudden I had all the time in the world, was homeschooling, right? I think we had 6 at that time. I don't think we had any more than that at the time. But then I was like, had this drive of like, there's a need. That movie Robots, like Big Weld, it's like, see a need, fill a need. I remember watching that as an adult and I was like, that's like a thing. Like the see a need, fill a need, as stupid and as Disney as that is. It's like, that's an actual thing. If you like to see a need and fill a need. And part of my faith is this thing of like, if you know what to do is right and you don't do it, it's like the sin of omission. Like if you know something that can help others and that is right and you don't do it, that also is not okay. It's not okay to like not do what is right. It's not always this idea of like doing wrong. And so for me, I was like, there is need. Like there is need in homes, there's need in communities, there's need in everything. And it was like, and I'm laid off. So I'm not okay just to sit by. But I'm also like a big rule guy. I'm like, I am a nightmare to drive with, because it's like going 8 over the speed limit, that's okay. Going 10 over, that is not okay. And like stopping at stop signs, even early on, it's like I will stop at a stop sign 3 a.m. on a logging road where I haven't seen a car in 2 hours. Like I will full stop. And I don't know why. So that wiring for following rules, but then also looking for the loopholes, was kind of how it started. So it was arrive, find this FM transmitter, start to test it out. And then as soon as I realized its range was like 400 meters, started to realize what I could do. And then I still had access to a lot of the camp's projectors and equipment. And then I have a lot of my own sound equipment at home. I play drums. And so part of the role of a drummer is to be of some value to a band. And so that like I had like other equipment. So it was just starting to test it. I was like, oh my gosh. And then running the first drive-in movie, and having like, I was on the side of Canadian Tire and had like 150 or 200 cars pull up. And just the response on social media was massive. People were like, this is great. And it was kind of that heroing thing. They're like, what a hero. Somebody wrote like Dave Horton for mayor. And it's like, I don't think you want that. Like, I know you like the movie, but you don't want chaos in those places. So that's really where it started, was like the equipment, the testing, and then it was like venue hunting. Like we hunted for venues for hours. Like where was there a parking lot big enough to host it? Because those movies at Canadian Tire was like, we can't go small, otherwise we're going to make issues. Because you need to, if it's a negative experience in any way, people just go back in their hole and hide. And then it was realizing, like talking to my buddy Kyle Sampson, because he does his own events. He's been doing them for years, and I would assist him with those, just help him because it's fun to do stuff together. But that realizing too, it was like, I have to get good at marketing. And I have to get, if my goal, if I think that what I'm doing is good, if I think that people going to drive-in movies is actually helping them, or drive-in video games, or drive-in like church services or weddings, if I think these are of value, if I really believe that, then I have to make sure that people can show up to these. And if I want them to show up, then they need to know about it. And if they need to know about it, they need to know that they don't even know that they want to go. So yeah, Kyle and I were driving around one night, just bombing around town. We dropped by a friend's house who we hadn't seen for like a couple of weeks. It was just kind of like super socially locked down. And we were leaving the friend's house. We were up by the airport. And we drove past this blanket on the side of the road. And I flipped around. I was like, something is not right there. Flipped around, and we had radios. Kyle and I, I'm a rules guy, so like I wouldn't go in his car with him during the pandemic. Drove him crazy. So we had these like walkie-talkies, and I walkie-talkied him, and I was like, I think that's a person that we just drove past on the side of the road. So I flipped around, and sure enough, it was like this lady with a camouflage blanket on her, just laying on the side of the road up in like Pinehorn, Buckwood. I don't know what I always confuse the area. But talking to this lady, she was like, I just took a whole bunch of pills, and I'm scared I'm gonna die. And I had just run some stupid, I say stupid, some silly, they're not stupid, they're silly. It's some silly drive-in trivia thing, right? And then like an hour later to find this lady who was like, I just went into the park, took a handful of pills, I'm scared I'm gonna die. I was like, what the heck is going on? Like what would have made this lady not take a handful of pills? And that's where some of the stuff for like Rooftop Rock came in, was like, if I really think that these drive-in kids trivia, drive-in movies, drive-in whatever, if I really think that these are helping people, then I really do think that if she was at something that night with someone, if she had seen any of her friends that night, I bet you she wouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. So then it was that idea of scale just like blew up to me. I was like, so then who cares? Let's go as big as we can. And then so Rooftop Rock was Kyle's thing. That was his thing that I was helping him with for sure. But it ended up scaling up it was going to be the largest drive-in event in North America. 15 acres of parking, right? It was like, and it would made like international news. BBC was calling. Like, it was that thing of like, yeah, if these are good, let's scale it. So that's kind of where like it started and why I ended up saying like, let's go huge. And where the personal cost became way less at that point too.
Yeah.
Where I could say like, if this is going to stop somebody from harming themselves, then what is it if I stay up till 2 a.m. for 3 weeks in a row sending emails, right? Like that doesn't matter. I'm off work.
Well, you're such a compassionate person, and it's incredible because you're not looking for the the reward for yourself. You're not looking for a financial reward. You're not looking for the recognition, although you do it in a slightly selfish way in terms of the fact that you're helping people, and therefore that makes you feel really good about yourself, which is the absolute most ideological, I don't know what the word is, but it's amazing, right? Because that's ideally what you want out of society. The other thing you mentioned earlier is that people were saying to you, this isn't normal. And that actually motivated you rather than demotivated you, because you realize there are not a lot of people out there that have the skill set and the mental aptitude to be able to actually execute on these things and help thousands and thousands of people, which is what you have now done. So Rooftop Rock came about, and then you started planning the Candy Cruise in Prince George. How many people attended the Candy Cruise, and how was that set up for those who are listening who aren't from the Prince George area?
Yeah, so Candy Cruise was the September long weekend. I was just leaving to go camping with my family, and I remember the events had all been like Rooftop Rock was going to be big. Everything else was kind of smaller, and my rule was, if somebody that can do this and get paid wants to do this, then I'm out. So I told a bunch of the production companies in town, like, if you buy an FM transmitter, then I will not give mine away for free anymore. Or like when the bars and pubs opened up, I stopped running trivia like the next day. And when the drive-in movie theater opened, I stopped running free movies. Because I was like, people are also hurting financially. So there's this element of like creating business. So the Candy Cruise was, I looked at Halloween, started to see like it was the first big event that was coming after the start of the pandemic. There was Easter, but there's no social expectations for Easter, like church services, that kind of thing. Jesus coming back from the dead, that's an expectation. No Jesus risen,
pretty big
no
one.
Easter. Yeah, that's a big one. But it was the first holiday coming where there was social expectation and nobody knew what to do with it. And I was like, if I can get a good idea out early enough, that is the most inclusive thing ever. I was like, then everybody will jump on that idea. But if I wait too long, some organizations will probably put out an idea that serves their organization best, but we'll divide and we will not conquer. I was like, this is something that if we unify on, I just kind of saw it as like, if we're all on the same page and there's scaleness, it can scale up, then this could be the thing for sure. So the premise was drive through Halloween. I talked to Northern Health and was like, would you shut down or have concern around someone driving through and driving past 4 or 5 businesses, and then those businesses, set up in a parking lot, handing with tongs and with like those like grabber reach poles, handing candy to cars. And Northern Health was like, nah, and they chewed on it and they got back and they said, that actually sounds like that could be really great. So then I messaged a smaller group. I kind of 10 businesses that I was like, if I can get these 10 as a foundation, then we'll scale up. And then it did. It scaled to 10 locations, intentionally spread as far across the city as I could get them. And that you dressed up, you hopped in your car, you drove around with your family or by yourself or whatever it was. And then, you would drive through these 10 different drive-through experiences. So you drive past 5 businesses, and each business or organization would kind of hand you candy. They would be in costume, they would set up, and then we had cosplayers. So there was like Boba Fett you would drive past, or a stormtrooper. I just love Star Wars. I don't care about any of the costumes. Which the Fiona from Shrek. And that's what it was you would drive through, stay in your vehicle, and then drive to the next place. But it was cool. 10 locations, all spread out. It took hours to do. Hours. Like to drive through.
And so how many people do you think attended this event in total?
I think what we told the media was like 2,500-ish. But that's like, was that 2,500 vehicles? Or was that 2,500 people? And like lots of people didn't do all 10 locations. The lines were a bit obscene. So lots of people just did like one or two. So then was that like 2,500 people went to 4 locations, but they didn't go to so like how do you do the math? I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I do know that the lines, the one line was 2 kilometers long, like up in I think Buckhorn. It's like it was 2K long and not stopped moving the whole time. It was like, oh my gosh.
It was unbelievable, and I was on the front lines at the time, and with my son, who I think was about 9 months old.
Yeah.
And I remember the kids that were coming through. I mean, there were buses of kids coming through from disadvantaged areas that were not going to have a Halloween.
Yeah.
They dressed up. They were super excited. They wanted to talk to you,
Yeah.
which of course was the most difficult part, because as a vendor, we were trying to get people through as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah.
But you could see the smiling faces and the fact that they were very afraid of not having that Halloween, and it let them just be a kid again. And it was really important. And I think that I certainly know that we saw more than 2,500 people here. So, Dave, you're a community-oriented guy. You do a lot for everybody else. And that doesn't just stop when you go home. You have a very large family. What are you willing to tell us about like your work at home to provide, more of an opportunity for kids in the community?
Yeah, our family's thing is from the outside. There's like definitely people romanticize our family. They look at it and they're like, what beautiful choices David and Janine made to like foster and adopt, and we've got kids with special needs, and there's like people assume this great they romanticize it, and they add, for a lack of a better term, they polish the turd. What they don't realize, right, is it's like what the reason our family is the way it is because of like brokenness and health issues and like not our choices. Janine and I never ever sat down and said, yeah, we want 6 kids. Like never. There's a couple of times Janine and I would be sitting with friends who had big families, and their kids would just be wild. I remember leaning over and being like, never. Like we will never, because I just saw like the chaos of kids. I was like, there's one thing when people complain about the choices they make. I don't think people realize that they do this completely, but it's like it's like griping about your spouse. It's like putting on stupid clothing and being like, these stupid pants I put on. It's like, you put those on. Like the choices you made are the reason that you are wearing those clothes. And it's like the choices you made are the reason you're in that marriage, and the reason that people complaining about their kids, right? Oh, my kids. Oh, and it's like, then get off of her. Like get a TV. Like stop procreating. like you made those choices. And that's something that's always killed me. And I was like, so let's make sure we don't put ourselves in this position that we're in this space where we're like complaining about how our family is built. I was like, I want to enjoy what we're doing. So yeah, essentially, like the long story short is we got married, tried to start having kids, realized pretty quick that we were struggling with infertility. We took the bunk beds apart in our room. We tried, we tried everything, but infertility is like a quiet, and it's a quiet, silent, and invisible grief for couples of like everybody around you is getting pregnant. Like your friends wash their underwear in the same load and they're pregnant, right? Like they're just, people just like, getting, and all your friends are getting it, and then they're starting to resent it. Oh, this pregnancy is the worst. And it's like, but that's all we want. Mm-hmm. All we want is to be pregnant. Like we would kill for the ability to be morning sick or whatever it is. So for us, it was tough. So we had like a couple of years of that like grief, that silent grief, and the roller coaster of like hormone therapies and stuff of like, maybe this will help us have our own kids. Nope. Guess we'll get our hopes up for the next thing. That sucks. So what we talked, this is the best part of it, is what we talked about and agreed upon was that we would never foster. We were like, that's too hard. And only better people than us can foster. Because you're willing to take somebody else's kids from a broken, a possibly broken situation, not a broken kid, but just a broken situation, and take them in, and then you have to give them back. You never know. And we were like, no, we aren't wired for that. And so then that's exactly what happened. Because we said we would never do it. So we were years into infertility, got my wife's boss on Facebook. She was a nurse, and she posted and said, "There's a kid with high medical needs. Do I know any nurse friends who'd foster?" And my wife and I were like, "Well, think about it." And then 10 days later, we had him. Like 10 days from having no kid, not being pregnant, not knowing what the next step of our journey is, to then having a baby in your home. It was a trip. And so then, and it was like, there was no diapers. It was a colostomy bag, but it was kind of nice because it's like your normal is whatever you learn, right? Like your normal is whatever you allow your normal to be. If you build up these walls and you say, I will never, I'm never going to do public speaking. I'm never going to help others in that way. And it's like, you're the only person who's convinced of that. And you see it like even in the awfulness that happens in people's lives when they have to care for a loved one who's sick or dying or whatever it may be, or people who get trapped in like wild situations who have to survive and the things they have to do to survive, the lengths they're willing to go to. So for us, it was, if we wanted kids, we had to be willing to do the steps. So we got our son, we fostered him, and then his sister was born, and that was just a phone call. Hey, his sister's been born, and we weren't going to be able to foster her. And then the grandparents that were going to look after her allowed us to foster, which is unbelievable as well. And then it's just that continued journey. So we did fertility clinic, got pregnant with triplets. We lost one early on in the pregnancy, which is tough and is another like silent grief thing. Like people lose babies, and culturally we don't really address that. And in faith communities, we're getting better at addressing that. But it's like, if that isn't grief, like, I don't know, like if that isn't like death and grief, I don't know what is. So pregnant with triplets, lost one early on, had twins, continued to foster, had kids kind of come in and out, and then got a girl, got her brother through foster care, and then found out that their mom had been a camper at the camp, and like met her and was like, oh my gosh, like I remember you. And she passed away when she was 23, which was super tragic as well. And it is like, people look at her family and they're like, what good people, what beautiful choices. And it's like, I didn't want this. Like, this is not a laid out plan and intention. What it was it's submission to us saying like, we don't know. And we actually are more convinced that what will come is better than if we planned it. And that's part of a faith thing, is submission and trust. And lots of people do that without faith. And that blows me away. Like without like the idea of, a higher power in like guiding and directing that. And that's where our hope and our trust is that we're going to be okay with whatever comes, even if we may not like it in the moment. So when I say polish the turd, it's like brokenness, death of a parent. You've got like addiction. You've got all these things that have put these kids into our family. So people look and they say, how great. And it's like, but like really look at it. And there's a lot less of our choice and more just it's our willingness more than anything else.
Yeah. A lot of people would have a very difficult time with just one, of these circumstances. You have a variety of them, but you've created a home and also like a strength for your family that is very recognizable outside of the community. How do you balance your own mental health needs because you're doing so much for everyone else?
I think through the pandemic especially, and through having kids, my wife and I have said over and over, like, I think we're just freaks. Like, I think is what it is. I think whatever is going on in my head and in my wife's head, like we don't know how we're wired, right? And I don't think, I'm convinced that people actually don't know themselves nearly as well as they think they do. That's the thing of like submission. Like I am totally convinced people have no idea what they're able to accomplish. They don't know. And the greatest lie is the one that they're telling themselves. Like when people say, I can't do it, it's like, I bet you could. Like I bet you could. But we have realized that we've just our wiring, not necessarily our choices, but just like whether it's genetics, it's circumstances, it's how we were raised, it's whatever's going on in my own head that I don't want to find out about, don't want to get it classified. We do have some like boundaries that I think other families have hit and have been like, we've tried and we can't kind of thing. Like we've had friends that have done fostering and they've had a really hard time with it, where we've had a lot easier time with it because of the circumstances that have come through. And we've looked at other situations and been like, I could never do that. So I don't know. For like running events and stuff as well, it's like it's recognizing not everybody is this way, and that's okay. We can have zero expectation on other humans. They need to be willing to have their own boundaries, etc. But I am convinced people don't know what they can do. They're convinced that they're good at watching TV and good at being entertained, but I think people can do a lot more than they think they can.
Yeah. Conor McGregor once said, of course, the legendary MMA fighter, that nothing in the external world can defeat us. It's only what we internalize that can defeat us.
Yeah.
And if we can strengthen our own confidence on our own abilities and our own trust in ourselves and or our faith and or the ability to understand that things will be all right, then you can build up a wall in which these circumstances that you do not have control over can really have less of an impact on you. And I think you have clearly demonstrated this, and obviously are very strong in character and as an individual. Talking about something really fun and neat is coming full circle now. You've recently been named the executive director of the Nest Lake Bible Camp. And so what do you envision for yourself as you embark on this new journey?
I love working for the camp. It's such a cool job. Like, it's such a cool place. So most communities our size would have like 3 or 4 camps in their area, right? They'd have a Baptist camp and like an overnight like YMCA camp and like, a Mennonite camp, like it'd be a variety of experiences. But the unicorn, the strangeness, the super unique thing with Nest Lake is that there's not a lot of other camps. Like, there's a really great day camp through Camp Kananack with the YMCA, and that's an awesome day camp. But there's not another overnight camp. I think one of the closest ones is our sister camp in Fort St. James. It's like our own organization is the next closest thing. So the ownership piece is one part of like being the executive director there, that I am really looking forward to, and really looking forward to kind of like essentially honor the monopoly that Nest Lake has. We have a total monopoly. If kids want to do an overnight camp in northern BC, they have to come through Nest Lake Bible Camp. And so for myself, it's recognizing we have no interest in waging a culture war. Our role as a camp and our role as a church isn't to come in and to push as hard as we can against culture. And that's like the common, I think, like misconception, is that we're here to like fight like this morality war. But for us, it's like we've recognized in our national who owns us this thing of like, if we're the only overnight place, then we need to really honor it. We are a Bible camp. We do teach, we do preach, we do, like kind of like invite people into the faith. But we also, I love telling our campers, like, you can come and tell us this is just horse crap. Like, we'll tell you what we believe, and we always give a response time after these discussion times. And that's the part I'm really looking forward to, is carrying some of that trust that's been built around my own name through COVID events like Candy Cruise, the most excellent cruise, and Family Day Adventure. These things that people were like, well, like what does Dave want out of these things? And hopefully carrying and honoring that trust and monopoly so that people they can come, have a great experience, hear our perspective, but not feel like pressured or forced kind of into anything. And even that thing of like that they're able to kind of develop their own beliefs by the conversations they're willing to have. Like, maybe they've never been asked what they think in response to any kind of spiritual conversation before. So that's part of it for sure, that I'm like, this is awesome. And then we get to do crazy stuff. Like, we get to do whatever. I'm like, we have like our vision, mission statements, that kind of thing. And the one thing that is just rolling around my head constantly, I read this book, Start With Why. And I'm like, what is our why? Because our mission statement has a lot of what we do and how we do it. And I'm pretty convinced our why, I haven't convinced our board of this or our staff or any supporters. I'm pretty sure our why is new experiences. Yeah. And that's like, and a new experience is a healthy friendship with an adult. Or for some, it's not being yelled at by an adult. For some, a new experience is sitting at a table for an hour, eating a meal and having just conversation. And where for others, a new experience is having a spiritual conversation. It may even be from like different ends in disagreement, but having one that isn't a fight, that is an actual sharing and conversation. And then there's new experiences of jungle swings and giant barges and run-on skits and the silliness and hilarity of what we do. So that's the thing that's stuck in my head of like, we get to just keep doing new things and offering new things to everybody who comes through. And it's like, that's a hoot.
Well, I envision that this is just like the perfect role for you because it's a culmination of everything that you love and everything you do well. Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Amazing book. Highly recommend anyone read it. Mm-hmm. Dave, for people who are interested in following you and seeing your development as you move forward into the future, what social channels can they find you on?
So through the pandemic, I built up this like pandemic friendly entertainment. That was part of the thing of like, if I don't market and I don't have a lightning rod for the attention to go to, then people won't know and my efforts will be less fruitful. So, but that now that the pandemic is done, I named that intentionally. So when the pandemic is over, so that, I mean, you can follow that thing, but it's like dead in the water. It really is like my personal Facebook, like just Dave Horton on Facebook or Dave Horton Dave on Instagram. It's like I just post my life and I just kind of run my life through those channels. Are pretty like transparency and openness are like really valuable to me and my wife, especially like in community work, that it's like people know what the good, the bad, the up, the down. And it's like I fundraise my wage. Like part of the weirdness of the camp is that we don't get paid like a salary. We get told you can raise this much, but you have to make it. And so much of getting people to buy in to support you financially and with prayer and other ways is for them to know what's going on. So yeah, my Instagram's Dave Horton Dave. Facebook is that. And then the camp posts quite a bit of stuff as well. But I just kind of run my life through those channels. It drives some people crazy, but...
Yeah, well, we could talk for another 2 hours. You have an incredibly interesting story. I think you helped a lot of people today. This has been You Sip, I Sip, and Dave Horton, thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to You Sip, I Sip. Please hit the 5-star rating and leave us a review. If you'd like to learn more about Northern Lights Winery, text us at 604-670-4046 or visit us on social media at Northern Lights Winery.